Elena Martinez's grandmother died at the age of 97. She left behind three things: a small house in Santa Fe, a lifetime of memories, and a recipe box that nobody was allowed to open. Elena stood in her grandmother's kitchen, holding the worn wooden box that had lived on the counter for as long as she could remember. It was beautiful, hand-carved with intricate flowers and vines, about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass lock that had never been opened in Elena's 35 years. "Your abuela was very specific in her will," the lawyer had said. "The recipe box goes to you, Elena, and you're not to open it until you're ready to understand." "Ready to understand what?" Elena had asked. The lawyer shrugged. "She didn't say, just that you'd know when the time came." That had been 3 weeks ago. Now Elena sat in the empty kitchen, surrounded by boxes of her grandmother's belongings, trying to decide what ready to understand might mean. She'd been ready to understand for decades. Abuela Rosa had always been mysterious about the recipe box, deflecting questions with a knowing smile and a change of subject. "Someday, mija," she'd say, "someday you'll need what's inside." Elena had assumed it contained family recipes, the enchiladas that had made Abuela Rosa famous in the neighborhood, the tamales people ordered months in advance for Christmas, the tres leches cake that had won county fair ribbons. Recipes Elena had tried to learn but could never quite replicate, no matter how carefully she followed Abuela's instructions. "You're missing the secret ingredient," Abuela would say with a wink. "It's in the box." Elena had thought she meant a spice, a technique, something culinary. Now, holding the locked box with no key in sight, she wondered if the secret ingredient was something else entirely. She tried the lock gently. It didn't budge. She looked around for a key, in drawers, in the sugar bowl where Abuela kept spare change, in the jewelry box on the bedroom dresser. Nothing. Finally, frustrated and grieving and tired of mysteries, Elena did something impulsive. She took a hammer from the toolbox under the sink and broke the lock. The brass mechanism shattered with a sharp crack. The box opened. Inside was not what Elena expected. There were recipe cards, yes, maybe 50 of them, handwritten in Abuela Rosa's distinctive cursive. But there was also something else. Letters. Dozens of letters, some yellowed with age, some more recent, all addressed to Abuela Rosa, all from people Elena had never heard of. She pulled out the first recipe card at random. It was for sopa de tortilla soup. But beneath the ingredients and instructions, in Abuela's handwriting, was a note. For Maria Gonzalez, made October 15th, 1983. She needed comfort after her miscarriage. The soup helped her grieve and reminded her that warmth could still exist in a cold world. She wrote back 3 months later to say she was pregnant again. Made her the soup throughout the pregnancy. Healthy baby boy, born July 1984. Elena stared at the card, confused. Then she pulled out another. Chicken mole. For James Richardson. Made March 3rd, 1991. He was a lawyer going through a terrible divorce, had forgotten what home tasted like. The mole reminded him of his grandmother who raised him in Oaxaca. He wrote to say the taste brought back the memory of unconditional love. Finalized divorce, April 1991. Doing better. Another. Pan dulce, sweet bread. For Sarah Chen, made June 12, 2005. She was struggling with depression after losing her job. The sweetness reminded her that life could still offer moments of joy. She wrote to say she started baking herself, and it became her path to healing. Opened her own bakery 2008. Card after card, recipe after recipe, each one marked with a name, a date, and a story. And each one accompanied by letters from the person who'd received the food, thanking Abuela Rosa, updating her on their lives, telling her how the meal had changed something for them. Elena spread the cards and letters across the kitchen table, her hands shaking. This wasn't just a recipe box. It was a chronicle. A record of 50 years of Abuela Rosa cooking meals for people who needed them, and somehow, impossibly, those meals had helped in ways that went beyond nutrition. The last recipe card in the box was different from the others. It was blank except for a title, The Last Recipe. And beneath it, in Abuela's handwriting, Elena, mija, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably confused? Let me explain. Food is more than ingredients and instructions. Food is love made visible. Food is comfort made tangible. Food is healing made edible. Your whole life, you've watched me cook for others. You thought I was just being generous, but there was more to it. I could taste what people needed, not with my tongue, but with something deeper. When someone came to me, hurting or lost or broken, I could sense what would help them heal. Sometimes it was the warmth of soup, sometimes the richness of mole, sometimes the sweetness of pan dulce. And when I cooked with intention, with love and attention and the desire to help, the food carried that intention. It became more than food. It became medicine for the soul. This gift runs in our family. My grandmother had it, my mother had it, I have it, and now it's passed to you. The last recipe is for you to create. Someone in your life needs help, needs healing, needs love, made visible. You'll know who. You'll feel it the way I always did. A pull, a knowing, a certainty that cooking for them will matter in ways beyond a simple meal. Trust your instincts. Cook with intention, and don't be afraid of the gift. It's not magic, mija. It's love. And love has always been the most powerful force in the world. With all my heart, Abuela Rosa. Elena sat at the table, surrounded by 50 years of her grandmother's secret life, and cried. Not just from grief, but from revelation. She'd always felt inadequate compared to Abuela Rosa's cooking. Now she understood why. It hadn't been about technique or ingredients. It had been about something Elena hadn't known to look for. But could she do it? Could she sense what people needed? Could she cook with that kind of intention? Elena looked at the blank recipe card, the last recipe, and wondered who it was meant for. She didn't have to wonder long. Elena's younger brother, Miguel, called the next morning. Hey, I'm coming over to help pack up Abuela's house, he said. His voice sounded off, strained, tired. You okay? Elena asked. Yeah, fine, just busy, work stuff. I'll be there in an hour. But when Miguel arrived, Elena saw immediately that he wasn't fine. He'd lost weight. His eyes had dark circles. His usual easy smile was forced. He moved through Abuela's house mechanically, packing boxes without really seeing what he was packing. Miguel, what's going on? Elena asked. Nothing, I'm fine. You're not fine. Talk to me. Miguel set down the box he was holding and sat on Abuela's couch. For a long moment he was quiet. Then, I got fired. 3 weeks ago. Haven't told anyone. Been pretending to go to work every day, sitting in coffee shops, applying for jobs. Laura doesn't know. The kids don't know. I don't know how to tell them that I failed. Elena's heart broke for her brother. Miguel was a software engineer, brilliant and successful, or had been. What happened? Company downsizing, nothing I did wrong, just wrong place, wrong time. But I feel like such a failure. Laura works part-time at the hospital. It's not enough to cover our mortgage. We have 2 kids in college, 1 in high school. I don't know what we're going to do, and I can't. His voice broke. I can't tell them. I can't see that disappointment in their eyes. As Miguel spoke, Elena felt something strange, a pull, a knowing. Looking at her brother's face, drawn with stress and shame and fear, she suddenly knew exactly what he needed. She needed to make him mole. Not just any mole. The recipe Abuela had made for James Richardson in 1991. The one that reminded him of unconditional love when he was going through his divorce. The one that helped him remember he was more than his failures. I need to cook something, Elena said suddenly. Come on. She led Miguel into the kitchen and pulled out the recipe card for chicken mole. It was complex. 23 ingredients, 3 hours of cooking time. But as she read through it, the steps felt clear, intuitive, like something she'd known her whole life but had forgotten until this moment. What are you doing? Miguel asked, confused. Cooking for you, Abuela's mole. You're going to eat it, and then you're going to tell Laura the truth, and everything is going to be okay. Elena, food isn't going to fix this. Trust me, please. Elena cooked with focus she'd never experienced before. She could feel when the peppers were roasted exactly right. Not by timing, but by some internal sense. She knew when to add the chocolate, not by measuring, but by how the sauce smelled, tasted, felt. She stirred with intention, thinking about Miguel, about his goodness, his brilliance, his worth beyond any job, about the brother who'd comforted her through her own divorce, who'd supported her through career changes, who'd always believed in her. She poured all of that, all of her love and faith in him, into the mole. 3 hours later, they sat at Abuela's kitchen table. Elena served Miguel chicken with mole sauce, rice, and warm tortillas. Steam rose from the plate, carrying scents of chile, chocolate, cumin, and cinnamon. Complex, rich, layered with history and intention. Miguel took a bite and his eyes widened. This tastes exactly like Abuela's. Exactly. How did you eat? Just eat, Elena said. Miguel ate slowly, reverently. As he did, his posture began to change. The tension in his shoulders eased. His breathing deepened. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face. I don't know what you did, he said, but I suddenly remember being 8 years old, sitting in Abuela's kitchen after I failed a math test. I thought I was stupid, thought Dad would be disappointed. But Abuela made me this same mole and told me that I was smart and worthy, and that one failure didn't define me. She said, Mijo, you are more than your mistakes. You are more than any grade or job or achievement. You are loved simply because you exist. He wiped his eyes. I haven't thought about that day in decades. But tasting this, I felt it, felt her love, felt her certainty that I was enough, even when I failed. And I realized I need to tell Laura, not because the mole magically fixed my problem, but because it reminded me that I'm still me, regardless of employment status, that my family loves me for who I am, not what I do. Elena felt something warm in her chest. The knowing, the certainty that the food had done what it was meant to do. Miguel called Laura right there in the kitchen. He told her everything, the job loss, the deception, the fear. Elena stepped outside to give him privacy, but when she came back in 20 minutes later, Miguel looked lighter. Scared, yes. Uncertain about the future, yes. But not ashamed. Not hiding. She's upset I didn't tell her sooner, Miguel said. But she's not disappointed in me. She said we'll figure it out together. And you know what? I believe her now. Before eating that mole, I couldn't imagine telling her. Couldn't see past my shame, but now... He shook his head, amazed. Now I remember who I am beyond my job. Thank you, Elena. I don't understand what you did, but thank you. After Miguel left, Elena sat in the kitchen holding the blank recipe card. The last recipe. She pulled out a pen and began to write. Chicken mole for Miguel Martinez. Made April 3rd, 2024. He needed to remember his worth when he felt like a failure. The mole reminded him of Abuela's unconditional love and gave him the courage to be honest with his family. He'll be okay. We'll all be okay. She tucked the card back into the recipe box, along with all the others. 51 recipes now. 51 stories of healing through food cooked with intention. And Elena understood. This was her inheritance, not just recipes, but purpose. Not just food, but love made visible. She was ready to understand. Word spread the way word always spreads in communities bound by shared culture and language. Elena didn't advertise, didn't tell anyone about the recipe box or her grandmother's gift or what had happened with Miguel, but somehow people knew. First, it was Miguel's friend, Carlos, who stopped by. Miguel said you made him some kind of life-changing mole. I know that sounds crazy, but could you maybe cook something for my mom? She's been depressed since my dad died. She won't eat, won't leave the house. I don't know what else to do. Elena felt the knowing. She needed to make pozole. The hominy soup that was comfort and celebration, that reminded people they belonged to something larger than their grief. She cooked it in Abuela Rosa's kitchen, which she decided not to sell after all. She'd moved in instead, leaving her apartment in Albuquerque to return to Santa Fe, to the house where Abuela had fed generations of people who needed feeding. Carlos brought his mother, Mrs. Herrera, to the house. She was small and frail, her eyes distant with grief. She sat at the kitchen table without speaking while Elena served pozole with radishes, cabbage, oregano, and lime. Mrs. Herrera took a bite, then another. Then she began to cry. "This tastes like the pozole my husband made for me on our wedding day," she said. 43 years ago. I haven't thought about that in so long. How young we were, how full of hope, how he promised to always make me laugh, and he kept that promise until the day he died. She looked at Elena with wonder. How did you know that's what I needed to remember? Not his death, but his life. Not what I lost, but what I had. Elena wrote Mrs. Herrera's story in the recipe box, and then she cooked for others, a young woman named Jennifer, who was struggling with an eating disorder. Elena made her calabasitas, summer squash with corn and green chili. Light and nourishing and gentle, it reminded Jennifer that food could be fuel and pleasure without being an enemy. Jennifer started eating regularly again. An elderly man named Robert, whose wife had Alzheimer's. Elena made him carne adobada, pork and red chile. The complexity of the flavors reminded him that even when things got complicated and painful, there could still be beauty. Robert found the strength to keep caring for his wife with grace instead of resentment. A teenager named Alex who was being bullied at school. Elena made sopapillas, fried bread with honey. Sweet and warm and comforting, they reminded Alex that gentleness could coexist with strength, that kindness to himself was a form of power. Alex started standing up for himself and others. Each person Elena cooked for, she felt the knowing. She could sense what they needed, not because they told her, but because the gift her grandmother had passed down let her taste their pain and know how to address it. But it wasn't magic. Elena understood that. The food didn't fix problems. It didn't erase grief or cure illness or solve financial troubles. What it did was remind people of something they'd forgotten. It opened emotional doors that had been closed. It gave them the strength to take the next step in their own healing. Elena kept all the recipes and letters in the box, just as Abuela Rosa had. People wrote to her, thanking her, updating her on their lives. She learned that Mrs. Herrera had started volunteering at a grief support group, that Jennifer was studying to become a nutritionist, that Robert and his wife had good days and bad days, but he'd learned to treasure the good ones, that Alex had started a kindness club at school. 6 months after Abuela Rosa's death, Elena's kitchen was a place of pilgrimage. People came from across New Mexico, sometimes from neighboring states. They didn't always know why. They just knew they needed to eat something Elena cooked, that it would help somehow. Elena never charged money. She cooked because that was the gift. That was the inheritance. But people left contributions, cash, vegetables from their gardens, offers to help with house repairs. The community took care of her because she took care of them. But there was one person Elena couldn't help. One person the knowing didn't work for. Herself. Elena stood in her kitchen, Abuela's kitchen, and realized she hadn't cooked for herself in weeks. She'd been so busy cooking for others that she'd been eating takeout, cereal, whatever was quick and easy, and she was tired, deeply, bone-tiringly exhausted. Cooking with intention for others was draining in ways she hadn't anticipated. Every meal required not just physical effort but emotional energy. She had to open herself up to people's pain, sense what they needed, pour her own love and intention into the food. It was beautiful and meaningful and completely unsustainable at this pace. Elena tried to cook something for herself one evening. She attempted the enchiladas Abuela had been famous for, but without a person to cook for, without someone's specific need to address. The food was just food. Good, yes, but not healing, not transformative, just ordinary. The knowing didn't work on herself. She called Miguel, who came over with his family. His job search was going well. He had 3 interviews lined up. The relief of honesty had been its own kind of healing. "You look exhausted," Miguel said bluntly. "When's the last time you took a day off?" "I don't know. There's always someone who needs..." "Elena, you can't pour from an empty cup. Even Abuela took breaks." Did she? Elena realized she didn't know. She'd never thought about how Abuela managed the gift. That night, Elena went through the recipe box again, reading every card, every story. She was looking for clues about how Abuela had sustained this work for 50 years. She found the answer in a recipe from 1968. Frijoles, simple beans, for Rosa Martinez, made May 15th, 1968 by my mother. I was exhausted after giving birth to my 3rd child. overwhelmed with 3 kids under 5, feeling like I had nothing left to give. Mama made me beans the way her mother made them. Simple, nourishing, prepared with the intention that I remember to nourish myself as I nourish others. The beans reminded me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is rest. Mama stayed with me for a week, cooking for me, watching the children. I learned that receiving help is as important as giving it. Elena read the card 3 times. Abuela Rosa had struggled with this too, had needed her own mother to remind her that the gift required balance. But Abuela's mother was gone. And Abuela was gone. Who would cook for Elena with that kind of intention? As if in answer, her phone rang. Maria Chen, the woman who'd opened the bakery after Abuela helped her through depression years ago. Elena, I heard through the grapevine that you've inherited your grandmother's gift, and I wanted to check on you. My grandmother had a similar gift. She was a healer in Taiwan, used food as medicine. She taught me that people with this gift can't use it on themselves. We need others to cook for us with the same intention we cook for others. So I'm coming over, I'm making you dinner. And you're going to eat it and rest. And you're not going to argue with me. Maria arrived an hour later with bags of groceries. She shooed Elena out of the kitchen and cooked for 2 hours. When she called Elena back, the table was set with congee, rice porridge with ginger, scallions, and soft-boiled eggs. My grandmother made this for healers, Maria explained. It's gentle, nourishing. And I made it with the intention that you remember you're not alone in this work, that there are others who understand the gift, who can support you, that receiving is as sacred as giving. Elena ate the congee slowly. It was simple, but as she ate, she felt something shift. The exhaustion didn't disappear, but it became manageable. More than that, she felt less alone. She'd been carrying the weight of the gift as if it were solely her responsibility. But Maria's presence, Maria's cooking, reminded her that she was part of a lineage, part of a community. How do I do this without burning out? Elena asked. Maria smiled. Boundaries. You can't cook for everyone. You have to choose who you help. Trust your instincts. They'll tell you when someone genuinely needs the gift versus when they're just curious. And you need to build a community of people who can cook for you with intention. People who understand what you're doing and will help sustain you. Over the next month, Elena made changes. She limited how many people she cooked for each week. No more than 3, giving herself time to recover between meals. She started a small group of people who understood the gift. Maria, Miguel's wife Laura, who turned out to have a version of it herself, and 2 others Maria introduced her to. They took turns cooking for each other, sustaining each other. Elena also started cooking for herself differently, not with the intention to heal specific pain, but with the intention to honor her body, to thank it for the work it did. Those meals weren't transformative like the ones she cooked for others, but they were nourishing in their own way. And slowly, Elena found balance. The gift became not a burden, but a practice, a calling she could sustain. 2 years after inheriting the recipe box, Elena sat in her kitchen with a young woman named Sophie. Sophie was 19, daughter of one of the people Abuela Rosa had cooked for decades ago. She'd come to Elena not because she needed to be cooked for, but because she wanted to learn. My abuela, your grandmother's friend, she had the gift too, Sophie explained. She passed it to my mother, but my mother died when I was young. I think the gift skipped to me, but I don't know how to use it. I can sense what people need, but when I cook, nothing happens. It's just regular food." Elena understood immediately. She'd felt the same way before opening the recipe box. The gift isn't just about sensing what people need, Elena explained. It's about cooking with intention, with love, with the belief that food can be more than nutrition. It can be healing, comfort, celebration, connection. It's about understanding that every ingredient, every stir, every moment of preparation is an opportunity to infuse the food with what the person needs most. She pulled out the recipe box and showed Sophie the cards. 51 stories now, plus several dozen more Elena had added. Each one a testament to food as love made visible. "Abuela Rosa taught me that the gift runs in families," Elena said. "But it's not just biological families. It's families of intention. People who understand that cooking can be an act of service, of healing, of love. You're part of that family now. I can teach you." Sophie became Elena's first student. Then there were others, people who felt called to this work, who wanted to learn how to cook, not just with their hands, but with their hearts. Elena started calling it the intentional kitchen. She held workshops in Abuela's house, teaching people the recipes from the box along with the philosophy behind them. How to sense what people needed. How to cook with love and attention. How to make food that nourished more than just bodies. Not everyone had the gift in its fullest form. That deep knowing, that ability to sense precisely what someone needed. But everyone could learn to cook with intention. Everyone could learn to put love into food. And even without the gift, food cooked with genuine care and attention did have an effect. Maybe not as dramatic as Elena's meals, but meaningful nonetheless. Miguel and Laura joined the workshops. Maria taught her Chinese healing recipes. Sophie brought recipes from her Mexican grandmother. Others brought dishes from their own traditions: Italian, Ethiopian, Indian, Vietnamese. The intentional kitchen became a place where cultural traditions met with the universal truth. Food made with love matters. Elena also created a scholarship program in Abuela Rosa's name. She used donations people gave her to help young people learn to cook, not as chefs or professionals, but as healers. People who would carry the philosophy into their own communities, their own families. 5 years after Abuela's death, Elena sat in the kitchen surrounded by a dozen students, teaching them to make pozole. The house smelled of hominy, pork, and red chile. Laughter filled the rooms. Stories were shared. And Elena felt Abuela Rosa's presence so strongly it made her tear up. This was what the recipe box had been building toward. Not just Elena inheriting the gift, but Elena sharing it. Creating a lineage, a community, a movement of people who understood that cooking could be an act of love, healing, and transformation. After class, as Elena cleaned up, she found a new recipe card tucked into the box. It was in Abuela's handwriting, but it hadn't been there before. Elena had gone through that box 100 times. She knew every card in it. The card read, "Pozole, for Elena Martinez, to be made by the community she builds. When she's weary of teaching, when she doubts whether this work matters, they will cook for her. They will remind her that she is not the only keeper of this gift, that she has built something that will outlast her, just as I built something that outlasted me. The gift continues, mija, from grandmother to granddaughter, to community to world. This is the inheritance. Not recipes, but love. Always love. Elena clutched the card and cried. Tears of grief for Abuela, of gratitude for the gift, of joy for the community she'd built. The next week her students surprised her. They'd organized among themselves to cook a feast for her. Each person brought a dish made with intention, food prepared with a specific desire to nourish Elena, to thank her, to remind her that she was valued and seen and loved. They filled Abuela's table with pozole, tamales, mole, calabacitas, frijoles, enchiladas, sopapillas, and more. Dishes from a dozen cultural traditions, all prepared with the same philosophy Elena had taught them. We cooked for you, Sophie said, because you've cooked for so many others. Because you need to be reminded that you're not alone in this work. Because the gift you shared with us is now ours to share with you. Elena ate slowly, tasting not just the food but the love behind it. And she understood something profound. The true inheritance wasn't the recipe box or even the gift itself. It was the understanding that love circulates, that what you give comes back to you, often in unexpected forms, that healing is never a one-way street. Healers need healing too. Teachers need teaching. Cooks need to be cooked for. The gift didn't end with her, it expanded through her. And that expansion was the whole point. 10 years after Abuela Rosa's death, Elena stood in a kitchen that was no longer just Abuela's. It was hers. It was theirs. The community's. The house had been renovated with donations and volunteer labor. The small kitchen where Abuela had cooked for 5 decades had been expanded into a teaching kitchen that could accommodate 20 students. The living room was now a dining room with a table that seated 30. The bedrooms had been converted into office space, and a library filled with cookbooks, recipe cards, and letters from the thousands of people who'd been touched by the intentional kitchen. Elena was 55 now, with silver starting to show in her black hair. She'd cooked for hundreds of people over the past decade. She'd trained over 200 students in the philosophy of intentional cooking. And she documented it all in recipe boxes that now filled 3 library shelves, each box a different decade, each card a story of healing through food. But today was special. Today, Elena's daughter, Isabella, who was 28, was graduating from the Intentional Kitchens Intensive Program. She'd spent 2 years learning not just recipes, but the deeper philosophy. How to sense what people needed. How to cook with love and intention. How to sustain the work without burning out. Isabella stood at the stove, cooking chicken mole for a woman named Patricia, who'd recently lost her husband. Elena watched her daughter work. The way she tasted the sauce, not just with her tongue, but with that deeper sense. The way she stirred with purpose. The way she whispered intention into the pot, as if the food could hear and respond. "You have the gift," Elena said when Isabella finished plating the food. "Not because I gave it to you, but because you chose it. Because you believe that cooking can heal." Isabella smiled. "I grew up watching you cook for people, watching how food prepared with love could open doors in people's hearts. How could I not believe? This is what I was meant to do." Patricia arrived, a woman in her 60s, hollowed out by grief. She sat at the table and ate the mole Isabella had prepared. As she ate, her shoulders began to shake with sobs. "This tastes like the mole my husband made for me on our anniversary every year," she said. 40 years of anniversaries. 40 times eating this exact flavor. How did you know? Isabella and Elena exchanged glances. The gift had manifested in Isabella in its fullest form. After Patricia left, promising to return for a grief support group Elena had started, Isabella and Elena sat together in the teaching kitchen. "I've been thinking about Abuela Rosa," Isabella said, "about how she kept the recipe box secret for so long. Why do you think she did that?" Elena had wondered the same thing over the years. "I think she was protecting the gift, making sure it went to someone who would understand, who wouldn't exploit it or commercialize it. She needed to know I was ready, not just to receive the gift, but to honor it, to understand that it wasn't about me, it was about service." "And you've done that," Isabella said. "You've honored her legacy." "We've honored it," Elena corrected. "This isn't my work anymore. It's ours, the community's. That's what makes it sustainable. It's not dependent on one person or one family. It's a philosophy that anyone can practice." They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the smells of the day's cooking: garlic, cumin, cinnamon, chocolate. The house hummed with the energy of all the people who'd been fed within its walls, all the healing that had occurred, all the love that had been made visible through food. "There's something I need to tell you," Isabella said. "I'm pregnant. Just found out last week." Elena felt joy surge through her. "A baby? Oh, mija, that's wonderful." "I've been thinking about what to teach them," Isabella continued, "about the gift, about this work. And I realized we don't know the full history. We know about Abuela Rosa, and we know she inherited it from her mother. But what about before that? Where did the gift come from originally?" Elena had wondered the same thing. She went to the library and pulled out the oldest recipe box, the one with Abuela Rosa's earliest cards. At the very bottom, beneath all the recipes, was a letter Elena had read before but not fully understood. It was from Abuela's grandmother, dated 1952, written in Spanish. Elena had Maria translate it years ago, but now she read it again with new understanding. "My dearest Rosa, I write this on the day I teach you to make your first intentional meal. You are 25 years old, newly married, just beginning to understand that cooking can be more than feeding. It can be healing. I learned this gift from my mother, who learned it from hers, going back 6 generations to a curandera in Chihuahua, who understood that all healing comes from love, and love can be transmitted through anything prepared with intention: herbs, prayers, or food. The gift is not magic. Though it may seem so, it is attention, it is care, it is the profound belief that what we offer to others with love will be received as love. In a world that tries to make everything fast and cheap and convenient, to cook slowly and intentionally for another person is a revolutionary act. It says, you matter. You are worth time and effort. You deserve nourishment, not just of body, but of soul. Pass this gift to someone who will honor it, someone who understands that the true ingredient in every recipe is love. And remember, Misha, the gift is not a burden to bear alone. Build community, cook for others, and let others cook for you. This is how the circle continues. With all my love, Bisabuela Maria. Elena finished reading and looked up at Isabella. 6 generations before Abuela Rosa. 8 generations before you. Centuries of women understanding that cooking with love matters, that food can heal, that attention and care are forms of medicine. 9 generations if you count the baby, Isabella said, touching her still flat stomach. And who knows how many more after that? Elena thought about the lineage, all those women in kitchens across centuries, cooking for people who needed to be fed not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. All those women understanding something essential, that love made visible through food could change lives. We should write it all down, Elena said. The full history, the philosophy, the stories, so future generations understand not just the recipes, but why they matter. Over the next year, Elena and Isabella compiled everything. They wrote a book, part cookbook, part philosophy, part memoir. It told the story of Abuela Rosa and the recipe box. It included recipes and the stories behind them. It explained the philosophy of intentional cooking, and it invited readers to practice their own form of the gift, to cook with love and attention, to feed people not just their bodies, but their hearts. The book was called The Last Recipe and All the Ones Before It. It became a quiet bestseller, passed from hand to hand, recommended by people who'd experienced the power of food prepared with love. It launched a movement. Intentional kitchens opened in communities across the country. Not franchises, but independent groups of people practicing the same philosophy. Cooking with care, feeding with intention, creating spaces where people could be nourished in multiple ways. And at the center of it all was Abuela Rosa's original recipe box, now on display in the Intentional Kitchens library, behind glass but visible to all who visited. A reminder that every movement starts with one person who believes that love matters, who understands that small acts of care, like cooking a meal for someone who needs it, can ripple out into the world in ways we can't predict or control. Elena was 60 years old when she finally understood what Abuela had meant all those years ago. Someday, mija, you'll need what's inside. She'd thought Abuela meant she'd need the recipes, but what she'd actually needed was the understanding, the knowing, the certainty that her life could be spent in service of others, that cooking could be her ministry, that love made visible through food could heal not just individuals but communities. The recipe box had been locked for decades, waiting for Elena to be ready. And when she finally opened it, what she found wasn't just recipes. It was her purpose, her calling, her inheritance. And now, watching her daughter prepare to pass the gift to yet another generation, Elena understood the final piece. The gift was never meant to be held. It was meant to be shared, to circulate, to expand beyond any one family or kitchen or tradition. Love made visible. That was the gift. That was the inheritance. That was the last recipe and all the ones before it. And it would continue as long as there were people who believed that cooking for others with intention and care was worth the effort. As long as there were people who understood that the most revolutionary act in a hurried world was to slow down and make something with love. Generation after generation after generation. The gift continues, always.